This is the quick overview. You've heard them say 10 questions, 10 minutes. It really just covers 6 topics. Most forms will be mailed in English only. There are about 13.5 million homes nationwide already identified will receive for the first time ever a bilingual English-Spanish form. Folks who want a form in the other languages, Spanish, Chinese, you see them listed, can call a toll-free number or go online and request those. And that information that those are available will be in language messages on the advance letter that every household will get saying, in Korean, for example, if you need a form in Korean, please call this number. And then you can see the remainder of the information. Again, please look it over once we're done, with the webinar. The householder is the person who fills out the form. It's person 1. Should be someone who's pretty much responsible in some way for the household. You kind of have to figure that out for yourself. But I want you to just be clear, when somebody comes in for help with a form, if your organization is setting up a census help center, let's say, you want to try to be sure that the person who's coming in is in a position to be person 1, meaning they know something about everyone else in the household. The final bullet is the other important one. Just keep in mind that the race and Hispanic origin status of person 1 for statistical purposes determines the race and Hispanic origin status of that family and household. So when the Census Bureau is publishing data on average median age of Hispanic households or families, that's determined by person 1 on the census form. All right, next slide. The number of people in the household. This, in addition to the very last ones we'll go over, race and ethnicity, this is the other really important question. How many people should be counted in every home? Now, the first person is the only one, the householder is the only one that's going to answer that. I did, by the way, put a little note about snowbirds because you are in Massachusetts, but frankly, there aren't that many people in hard-to-count communities that have second homes in Florida. But we do get a lot of questions about that from northern states, so I wanted you to know about that. But how many people were living or staying here on April 1? And that means, folks, that anyone who has no other permanent home, no other usual place that they stay, should be included on that household's form. Now, you'll see on question 2, this is a new question, designed to help the Census Bureau really hone in on whether the questionnaire is filled out properly, that did they maybe leave somebody off? So there's some things that you can check off that would be a signal to the Census Bureau that maybe they should follow up with that home by phone to ask, really should you have left that person off? Just a reminder to everyone, though, that if somebody lives in what's called a group quarters, a long-term nursing home, a prison, they are away at college, and they don't live at home, they don't live with their parents, they live in a college dorm, or maybe they even live in what we call college towns.
Would this include group homes for people with disabilities, for example?
Yes, any long-term facility, more than I just got out of the hospital and I'm here for 3 days for rehabilitation and then I'm going home, yes. So those people are not counted on the household questionnaires. They are part of the group quarters enumeration. But again, question 2 is what we call a coverage question, newly designed to help the Census Bureau identify households where maybe there's going an undercount because not everybody was put down on the form. Tenure is owner or renter. Again, only one person in the home has to answer that. Is this home owned? And there's a couple of choices, like is it owned with a mortgage, is it owned free of a mortgage, or is it rented? And this is important information because, again, it's a proxy for lower income households and higher income households, just generally. And the tenure information is used for other federal program purposes. But again, that question will only be asked of person 1. And then telephone number, just look again why they ask for the phone number. So if people ask you, why do they want this, you can tell them why it's important. Let me just hone in on the second bullet. The Census Bureau will have to follow up with all what they call large households. Households that have more than seven or more residents, or for households that receive a bilingual form, 9 or more residents. And what I mean is this. The census form, when you go online and download it, you'll see there is space to answer all of the 6 questions, 10 questions, 6 topics, for up to 6 people. And then you list persons 7 through 12. And I'm going to go over this later on the final slide. And so the Census Bureau then must call those homes. They will not be visiting in person. It's too labor-intensive. They will call every home that has reported 7 or more residents and collect the rest of the information for those people. So there's got to be a phone number on there. Just again, if you're in a household that gets a bilingual form, because data shows that Latino households tend to be bigger on average, there is space for up to 8 people to fill in their full information. I know a lot of low-income houses do not have phones. Try to encourage them to figure something out. Is there a neighbor with a phone? Is there a relative? You know, they could get the phone call and say, I will have Mary call you back to complete the questionnaire. The Census Bureau would be fine with that. This slide just tells you why they need the name. It's really just for administrative purposes, but also people sometimes need access to their own census form. There are immigrants who, for one reason or another, need to be able to prove down the road that they were in the United States on date X. And they can request, official copy of their census form to say, I was here, I filled out a census form. They're the only ones, by the way, that can get that for 72 years. And again, genealogy, it's fabulous, family history and the like, but only after 72 years. This question is the only one that the person one does not answer. And that's because everyone else in the household is related, and I put that in quotes because it doesn't mean they're blood related. They are related in some way to person one. Yes, and there are a number of check-off boxes, quite a few in fact. It includes foster children, adopted children, biological children, husband, wife, sister, brother, other relative, other non-relative, a boarder. You'll see on the second bullet, a boarder, a roommate, unmarried partner, and then there's a checkbox for other non-relatives. So in other words, if it's just somewhere, let's say it's somebody who you just know from work and they lost their job and then they lost their house and they have nowhere to go, and you've taken them in. And right now, your home is the only place they can stay. And this may be happening a lot in hard-to-count communities. So they're not related to you, and they're not a roommate, and they're not really a boarder because you're not charging them rent. That's an other non-relative. They need to be counted, and there's a box to check for them. Just take a quick look, age and date of birth, why they ask you both. Believe it or not, there are a lot of people who get their age wrong. They write down the wrong number. The Census Bureau can check that with the birth date. Also, they use that just to try and determine whether they've had a duplicate count. Hispanic origin and race. Here's the overarching concept. You want to tell people they really need to identify themselves how they see themselves. It's a self-identity. You must answer both questions. They're going to ask you, well, how come Hispanic origin is separate? It's not a race. You can't go into a long dissertation on that. Just tell them it's federal policy. It's not the Census Bureau's decision, but the Census Bureau is going to be reviewing that policy over the next decade. I mean, there's just, otherwise you could just get bogged down in a very lengthy discussion about that. The Hispanic origin question, just so you know, comes before the race question because research has shown when it was flipped, there was a lot of people didn't answer the Hispanic origin question when they had already filled out the race question. The Hispanic origin race question, this just tells you which actual question it is on the forms. but everyone needs to fill it out. So if you're not of Hispanic origin, that's the first thing it asks. Mark no, move on. If you are, the largest subgroups are actually listed. It says yes, Mexican, yes, Puerto Rican, yes, Cuban. But just because those are numerically the largest, check them off. If not, you can check off yes, other Latino or Hispanic origin, and then you may write in your subgroup. And the Census Bureau is planning to provide some special reports, some special tabulations showing the numbers of people who have written in Dominican or the other largest groups. So really encourage people to write those other subgroups in. Okay, so race. Now, this again is the other area that gets very complex and raises all sorts of emotions, but let's just cut to the chase. First of all, it's only been since the 2000 census that people can check off more than one race. And by the way, let me just back up. Yes, you may check off more than one Hispanic origin. You may choose more than one race, but technically you will never see the Census Bureau publish data that says multiracial. It will say 2 or more races. And they will eventually publish data for all the different 2 or more races, 3 or more races, combinations. There's like 163 combinations. So just wanted you to know that. And then they also publish various data on race, both what they call single race responses and then what they call the all-inclusive responses, which will add up to more than 100% usually. Because if somebody checks off Asian and, they're not Asian, I'm sorry, Chinese, let's say, Chinese and black, then they are in the Asian category. When the Census Bureau publishes black alone, that person will not be in those statistics. But when they publish the all-inclusive statistics, that person will be both in black alone or in combination and Asian alone or in combination. As you can see, the numbers can start adding up to more than 100% of the population. There is a choice for some other race. And this is where it gets a little more complicated, because I know that there are a number of groups out there now, population groups, that are not happy that the census form doesn't provide checkoff boxes for many of the white subgroups, we'll call them, white ancestries, national origins, with whatever term you prefer to use, and black ancestries or national origins. So people will see a list of 8 or 10 Asian national origin if somebody wants to identify as Jamaican. They can do 2 things. They can check the black box and then write in Jamaican next to some other race. Or they can just check some other race and write in Jamaican. But just understand that many of the Census Bureau is not going to tell you this. Many of the major black advocacy groups across the country are telling their constituencies this. Mark the black box, and then if there is an ethnicity or subgroup that you would like to put down as well, write it in next to some other race, because the Census Bureau is planning, you see it in the middle bullet, a series of special reports at some point after the census to publish more detailed information on Jamaicans and Haitians. The same with Arab American. That's another big thing. Under the federal policy, Arab Americans are considered white. That doesn't sit well with a lot of people of Arab ancestry. What those leaders are telling their constituency is either check white but write in next to some other race, Arab or Egyptian, or something like that, or just don't check white, check some other race and write in Arab. People have a choice. And if you can just get a sense from them, say, what do you consider yourself? What do you most identify with? And then use the guidelines I'm giving you to help them identify themselves, to check off a box, to write in a response that best reflects that identity. Let's flip to the next slide, which is the I don't see myself on the question. Again, this is where you get into the white subgroups mostly, and particularly black subgroups. And this is, just some background for you so you can help explain to people why the race question is worded and formatted the way it is. I want to say one other thing about why there are a lot of check boxes for Asian and Pacific Islander subgroups. There is not a box that says Asian, because most immigrants from Asian countries, they don't call themselves Asian. That's an American term. So that is one reason this has evolved. But the other is that the reason the Census Bureau started collecting more detailed information on those subgroups has to do with the huge refugee influx after the Vietnam War. Yes, the Census Bureau is already looking at ways to modify the question for 2020. There will be test questionnaires embedded in this census, and we can't even get into that right now. The last opportunity for the Census Bureau to say, should this person have been counted on the form, or shouldn't they have been? And they will look at that question and say, there's a couple of things you can check off. Do you live or stay somewhere else? Where? So, for example, if you say, well, yes, I live at college, then they'll say, that person should not have been on this form. It's a duplicate, probably a duplicate. So they may take you off or call to clarify. But equally important, is whether they might spot some omission. So again, that's what we call a coverage question. That's very important. So what happens to persons 7 through 10? There is a roster. Those people, the householder will fill out for those people up to 12 that little bit of information, and the census staff will follow up. What do you do if you have more than 12 people? That's where people need to get Be Counted forms, so that person 13, 14, 15 is counted. They can pick up these Be Counted forms at the QACs or the Be Counted sites and fill it out and send it in. Be Counted forms, they will be asked for an address. Notice these forms do not ask you for your address. They are barcoded to a specific housing unit. But if you fill out a Be Counted form, you must provide an address so the Census Bureau can verify that that address exists and that they didn't get a form from that address, and then they'll add you to the count.